Radio. So thanks again for coming this week, the third session, and we're going to try and get past slide 50 today. Hopefully, we're up to 28. So last week and the previous session before that, we sort of ran through, a bit about the models themselves, or quite a bit about the models, how different companies or sort of different approaches to the information processing architectures, the different sort of augmentation possibilities, I guess, with these models, and talking about different ways to set up like companion models, or like this one shown, reliance on rules versus sort of free thinking, I suppose, and briefly about prompt engineering, things like that. Moving into like synthetic data generation, with language models being one sort of possibility, I suppose. The other one being like that federated learning. I'm sure there's others that I haven't mentioned here. They're just the two main ones from an AI point of view. So finally moving into SurveyLM after now into the third session. SurveyLM itself is yes, synthetic data generation platform. It built on top of these large language models and OpenAI in particular, using the GPT.3.5, the 4.0. I think 4 was in there at one point as well, and 4.0 small, which is the new one, the small language model from OpenAI as well. But the idea behind it, I suppose, with the prompt engineering and the way that the information processing architecture is set up, can also be used in the future with, say, Claude models from Anthropic. Essentially, it's just a web app, in the sense that we've got it sort of running on this cloud server. Every time you go onto a website, I sort of covered this in another course. Ben and I did EFB 350. Every time you go onto a website, the website's actually sitting on some server somewhere. So you're sort of end agent as the computer, I suppose. You're interacting through a bunch of different servers and routers, ultimately doing a call between this survey where the website's sort of hosted, plus does all the sort of endpoint handling in terms of calls to other APIs or things like that. Basically wraps everything up for you nice and simple, so you can just focus on these 2 points: survey data and agent profile, which I'm going to get into a little bit further on. So if you think of generative AI and the industry at the moment, there's a couple of like big players like OpenAI, Anthropic. Who else? Perplexity is another one. There's like 5 or 6 key players. Those guys are developing the foundation models, so the big pre-trained large language models, the ones that we use, as the second tier or the sort of the second tier industry, I guess, players in that sense. So using these foundation models to do something else, for downstream applications, or augmenting them in a way to achieve something that we want. So again, a couple of big players with their foundation models. They've got all the money, they've got all the data to be able to develop these big, useful sort of general reasoning models that we come in and interact with through APIs, and in that sense, software as a service or Gen AI as a service sort of platform. The key idea or the key value props here, which we've sort of discussed in bits and bobs, is the cost and time efficiencies. Just based on sort of a rough estimate, like 20 to 30 times more sort of cost effective than comparing to, say, like Prolific, Since, MTurks, all those sort of micro worker platforms, as well as the time to feedback as well. So time to gathering insights and data. Given that you're making a call to an API, it's almost like an instant sort of response in that sense. So the data collection period reduced significantly, but with the ability to generate such sort of accelerated insights in that sense, you're also probably going to be a bit smarter about what you actually ask. And a lot more work goes into the front end of designing your experiments, your surveys, things like that. There are other tools that I'm working on just to sort of create agent data sets will create synthetic representations of a real data set using some Python code, things like that, which I'm going to be sort of looking to release over, I said the next month, a month ago, or 2 months ago, 3 months ago. So maybe it's the next month or the next 2 months. We'll see what happens. But the code's there and it's ready. I just haven't put it out yet. So look, just some more sort of highlights, I guess, or sort of potential areas. You know, again, scalability. You know, you can look at sort of scaling up many different diverse agents, or maybe it's the same one asking many different questions to the same agent, or bringing in many different agents for one question or multiple questions, sort of thing, and doing that all at once. Flexibility, obviously, just having your sort of question and answer instruction. That's it. Whatever that looks like, whatever you want to make that. Is it a survey? Is it a question? It's straight up an answer. Like, you know, how old are you? Provide a number. Simple. Or is it like a full scenario? You know, imagine you're this X, Y, Z, or you're in this sort of shopping scenario, and X, Y, Z does this. What we do next? Things like that. And I've got a few examples of those coming up as well later in the slide deck. So quite easily to adapt, I guess, in that sense, given it literally is just 2 boxes, question, answer, instruction, whatever you can think to fit within that. And I guess an emerging or sort of possible benefit here, particularly around these sort of exploring these taboo or sensitive or challenging research topics. You know, something where maybe if you ask a human on a survey, maybe they'll give you the right answer, you know, fully sort of transparent answer. Maybe they're working in that sort of like social desirability, trying to sort of make sure that I don't think they're a dick in the answer that they use. Or maybe it's even just about access to you know, thought processes and things like that, which maybe humans don't have as easy access to those. You know, what am I actually thinking, and that sort of stream of consciousness sort of thing. So maybe there's good sort of opportunity there to apply language models and you know, survey LM in that context. The pictures up here just really, you know, giving you that sense, I suppose. You a bit wacky fingers. Thanks for OpenAI for that, but you know, giving you that sense, I suppose, or creating these like little worlds, I guess, or society, synthetic society that you can sort of, you know, tweak and get a sense of what's going on. Maybe more so than you could, you know, in the real world, potentially. You know, given that I can sort of scale it down, abstract away, focus on just what's in here, and you know, almost ignoring everything else. But you've got to be mindful of what else is going on in the knowledge base when you're focusing on this part. Yeah.
One question. So when you say you do like a survey with multiple questions, and you ask them this artificial agent to provide an answer, should I consider that as one agent answering multiple questions, or multiple, like in that sense, or is that multiple agents answering the different questions?
Depends how you set it up. If you've got, we'll get into it a little bit more, but like, say you've got, are you asking about the AI religion paper, or in particular, or just in general?
No,
yeah.
Just in general.
Okay. If it's, you can either have it sort of setting, you know, asking, answering these questions from one profile. It depends what you put in the agent context. If I want to have, you know, I create profiles of say 30, 100 people. They all answer the same question set, sort of thing. Each individual person, you'll get 30 rows of, or whatever, sort of 30 responses to your survey data set. If you only have one agent, it's just going to be, you know, 30 instances of that one agent, I guess. Is that sort of answering your question?
I guess like what I'm thinking is like, I mean, if you answer a survey as a human, I guess you might, I don't know, maybe learn a little bit through the process as well, and then I'm just not too sure, like, does the artificial agent does the same?
Yeah.
In a sense, or is it a bit different?
We've got, the way that we've set Bickley survey LM up. And I guess one way you can think about the API calls is, one of the options we have in there is called like batch mode. So say you have like 10 questions in your question data set and one agent or 10 agents, whatever, however you want to go about it. You can say batch mode off. Basically, we don't batch all the questions together. We answer them one by one, and it's like an independent API call. So technically speaking, you could go, same agent, 10 different versions of or slight tweaks of the same question, or you could ask the same agent, across 2 different simulations. If you run them close together, your part about the learning, the feedback. If I went from, I did it in 1 week, start of April, and maybe I did it at the end of August, there might be some RL from, learning from feedback, like the RL from human feedback.
I think what you're referring to, and there's big literature on survey questions. When do you ask which question, whether the question asked then affects the answering of the other question. So what you're saying in that sense is that with moving away from the batching would mean that you have the same agent, and this agent itself has no memory of any past questions.
Yeah,
is that correct?
That's a good question.
Yep.
So that would mean
Yep.
then you would have complete independency without any worrying about any framing or past influence of a question itself.
Yeah, if they're separate API calls, so with the batch mode off, we make it separate API calls per question. Yeah. And you can do the same thing with the actual API itself. Like you can, if I ask the same question but 3 different API calls, same question, same wording, it's effectively, unless you change the agent context, you can effectively think of it in a similar context of
can you guarantee that even if you classify characteristics of the agent, let's say for example this kind of sex, this kind of age, can you be 100%? Can you be sure it's the same agent?
Not really.
Because then
it depends how much you narrow it down to, right? Like if you give it very specific, like a very detailed human or description, again, it's about the context representation. Yeah. So it's still based on, it is a probabilistic. So again, go back to what we, the sort of characteristics of the models themselves and how they work. It's sequence to sequence prediction, and it's a probabilistic.
So has anybody done any work on testing that randomization? Because this is important. Things like systemic bias and ordering bias in survey responses are a real problem.
Yeah,
I think it's been isolated sort of studies and things like that.
I don't think there's any research yet on that one, but I think one could do, for example, do it with major surveys like World Bias Survey, and look whether you have there some issues, and then compare it with that data.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So not just looking at, for example, what we're doing at the moment with this kind of value alignment, that stuff, but also looking at, are there any biases in that sense?
Yeah, I think bits and bobs have been like sort of looked at, or the classic sort of do we transfer order effects, or whatever, framing, things like that. It's going to make a mass. I think it would make a bigger difference in LLMs than it would with humans, I would think, but for like order differences and things like that. But it's still so open question.
But if the KB reflects the humans, are we still going to get a biased Big 5 personality thing if we ask the wrong question before it? Because we get real issues with this. The retest bias on that survey instrument is abysmal, and yet we all use it constantly for personality. Right? So it'd be great to test this stuff, to pick up a bunch of papers and go and replicate them with the agents to see if we get the same issue. Right?
And again, if you're playing, you can play around with the the temperature or the top P, temperature being like that sort of the variance of the sampling sort of from your distribution, to sort of get more of that randomness, like day-to-day effects. Like if you're thinking like a human, I'm answering the World Value Survey, they come to my door, maybe I had I had a shitty night's sleep last night, or maybe I had a great night's sleep, and the 2 different versions of me, the 2 different instantation, or you want to call them 2 different API calls, if we had a split universe, that's effectively 2 different API calls, like the many worlds hypothesis or whatever. If you try that, you're going to get a different answer. Is it, if I have temperature down 0, I'm probably going to get the same answer for the language model. If it's up high, I'm probably going to get closer to that, like day-to-day or mood variance or whatever, like vibe the day.
I think good approach would be to University of Exeter is one of the leading environments for survey design. So it would be good to look at their survey design handbook. And
Exeter?
Yeah,
Uni of Exeter.
Leading in survey design. And then see whether, for example,
the APA Association looks this thing.
Look at the classification and then play around with it. I was wondering also whether at the moment we are focusing a lot on actual responses, but maybe we need to focus not just on response but also on missing values.
Yeah.
Maybe, for example, we look at reporting particular questions in weather surveys where people refuse to give an answer more than others.
Yeah.
And see whether there's consistency in terms of not reporting. That would be very interesting to understand.
I'll be completely honest.
Trying to overcome our issue with reported income.
No, I'm just saying that if you want to see alignment is not just answering; it's also not answering.
Yeah.
Because I think my point is sometimes not answering is a very strong psychological effect, even stronger than the answering. And I think that's
like a stronger proxy for that value perspective.
Alignment, psychological alignment. So I think we need to pay attention on non-responses, and then it's an interesting discussion there in terms of thinking about also afterwards imputing and how you impute it. Do you use, for example, you could think about also, do you use actually real-world data of humans to impute, or can you actually also use synthetic data to impute better? A lot of interesting things from a methodological point of view.
An extreme example is if you ask the life satisfaction question, and then you ask the happiness question, just replace the word life satisfaction with happiness, exactly the same wording. You get different response. You flip them around, you can get different responses.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, that's an extreme case, but it's one that in my literature nobody's been able to resolve it, right? Because the human brain sees things differently.
Ordering of the questions.
But things like wording and ordering is
massive. Yeah. So it's like it's really interesting. I kind of like hinted at it last week, like with the replication stuff. Like, it's like what is a replication? Like what is a successful replication? Like what does that actually mean? Because most of them don't actually replicate, or if you don't replicate, what is it actually? Is it a difference in the control agent, the person walking around talking to you right now in the session, or is it the blue carpet, or the nice windows and things like that, like or is it a closed-in environment with your blinders up around your computers? Like all these things feed into the context of the replication. So like the context is again, it's and these models are very context sensitive. So
see, what we've done today is we've locked the items. Right? So look at trust, right? We've locked it on Julian Rodgers,
like validate
1967.
Whatever.
And if you want to do a trust survey, right, you got to use this one or that one, right? And the APA go to a lot of trouble to authenticate. That is benchmark. This thing that you're going to compare society against, right? Here we've got not only adjustment of the questions, but we've got adjustment of the individual on the back end. So we can't do retest thing because we don't have the same individual with this, right?
But you also, I think the problem is think about experimental economics. There's huge problems also. What's the difference between subject pool in Australia compared to Eastern Europe? And so there you have the same issues. We don't really know well enough what's the implication of that. This is why Marcus is trying to get a DECRA around that question. What do we know around these kind of factors?
Well, trust is a perfect area on that. You get very different things with culture. We've been talking about this previous. You get cultural effects on trust questions. And behavioural changes across societies.
I mean, it's and like again, come back to that thing we talked about briefly last week. Like, if your typical study is only reporting on like 5 different demographic factors, or they only asked about 5 of them, because every time you do a survey, you got to keep it below 8 to 10 minutes or 8 to 12 minutes or whatever they say is the golden standard. So that restricts the demographic questions that you can actually collect and understand. So there's a lot more like unobservable, I guess, that you're not sure of even when you're looking at the study and things like that. So yeah, I guess being able to instrument in that way with something like this or language models, you can change in and out, or all these different treatment variations around the agent, different demographic or profile characteristics, and as well as the questions, the ordering, the wording. Hopefully by doing both sides of it and being able to control both sides, we can sort of hone down some of these individual sort of differences of people leading or questions. And how does that lead to response? How does that actually, the deviation in response, how does that relate to the context of the question / the person?
When you can't pay, it's impossible to have the money available to really test that all these kind of variations. You can't do an experiment.
No, we need to rely across comparing studies as well.
Very simple ones, like
replications.
max you have maybe 5 countries at max, but this is already huge investments. So this one could actually get a little bit of sense about it. Maybe not accurate fully, but it
I wonder if it's closer to meta-analysis.
Yeah,
I wonder if it's closer to meta than it would be to individual studies.
Well, I think we might be getting meta-analysis out of this.
Yeah, but it would be much. The beauty would be very nice macro meta-analysis compared to all these kind of aggregated things, and comparing Apple with
with something else.
It would be more precise.
Yeah.
So more precise. Although it's still a little bit unsure.
Yeah.
What it is, but it's still because this empirical meta-analysis, they're also quite messy.
Yeah.
Because the information is not consistent through all the studies.
Yeah.
And then you run it more as kind of almost macro level on a regression base, and the figures it's
the averaging of averages and standard deviations is kind of weird when you do it across.
But it would be smart to think about it that way as a meta-analysis.
Yeah, so long roundabout way of answering your question, Ivan. It's still probabilistic, but if you say if temperature is 0, so that's meant to be more deterministic. I feed in the same agent context across multiple different API calls. I should get something pretty much the same if it's temperature 0. If I turn up temperature variance to reflect maybe what a variance of a human would be on a day-to-day basis, like my personal temperature is probably a little bit higher than it's definitely not 0. A bit wacky, and then my top P is probably pretty high as well, because I lose track of what I'm saying half the time. So my settings are out of whack too. But so that sort of if I played with my settings, I turned my temperature down to 0, maybe it was, and my top P, then you ask me the same question on different days of the week, maybe I do have the same response or very close, less variance.
Temperature is a really big problem or interesting analysis. Do we have a good sense about humans in terms of temperature? And in the way temperature is actually
really interesting.
Classified the way Serverland classifies temperature in all the AI models, because I think it's good to have a theory of humans in terms of temperature.
It would be very interesting.
Is this variant stuff, is that enough? Because you would need to work with similar things, the randomness and all that. I mean, what do we know in terms of applying this kind of classification to humans?
You need longitudinal of the same people, right? Like, and then so you can compare across those times the response variance, but then that's a very clinical way of as in it's just.
Yeah, but this would help us. This would be nice guiding principle. Otherwise, we're just playing around. We don't know.
I've got that's interesting.
And then we just use temperature 0, and then we play around with the temperatures to see the robustness.
Yeah.
But we don't know what that is.
Yeah.
We don't have a theory about this.
Yeah, it would be real. Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Anyone who's listening to that one.
excuse my ignorance, but could you define temperature for me?
Yes, it is. It is our. I don't have any things showing. It's basically like the when you're outputting a token, so sequence in, and I'm generating my sequence. What should my sequence out be? It's like a prob distribution of the next likely token. My temperature changes the variance. Like, so if I have very skinny, I've got to really pretty much choose that one point. I'll draw.
So it tweaks the probabilities. Yeah.
It tweaks the distribution and increase the variance.
See, ketotic and miso.
So it's essentially like, sorry for the guys online, you won't be able to see it, but
Sounds like a JK coefficient. No, can't see.
Okay, this would be temp equals towards 0, maybe. This equals maybe temp equals 0.5. So as you get temperature goes up, your variance sort of basically you're choosing from a larger possible set of tokens that could be relevant to that context. Top P is basically if you're thinking about a sequence has multiple, or a sentence that has multiple words in it. Each of those words, the top P sort of has the connectedness from the last token to the next token. So if you turn it up, then you might lose track of what you're saying.
So you jump.
You jump around. You might just sort of
jump around, but you may become creative too.
We may become so not too sure which one it is.
I've got a question from Tom.
Yes. Personality preference of the agent preset or randomized in a certain range. Is the personality? So it's really up to how you want to do it. You can do it both ways, I guess. The question was, is personality / preference of the agents preset or randomized within a certain range? If you took the base model without the off-the-shelf, the API or ChatGPT without anything else, you're going to pick up whatever personality or preferences OpenAI is trained into that model. If I start to introduce context variables, so context about, let's say age, it could be a specific parameter, like 12, 13, a specific age, or it could be a range of ages, that's fine as well. It's really up to you how you want to go about it, and there's an empirical question there, even like in, the difference between age ranges versus sort of like individual ages, and how the fidelity of individual ages, I don't know, like how accurately can we go with individual ages versus groups? Most of our data and papers on the web probably report age ranges, right? So maybe there's more variance captured there. I don't know.
We need to think more about constraints because of the knowledge base. Because that's what, for example, if you look at AI models like SOAR compared to GPS, so what Newell did is introduce more constraints to make it more human. In terms of, you have limited attention span, you can't retrieve all the knowledge. So there's a lot of constraints, and those constraints makes the person more human. Do we need to think not just about classifying characteristics of the humans, but also think more about do we need to talk about those constraints more? In that sense, is that something interesting? I think that this is something we need to think much more. It's a new way of looking at constraints. Like economists are not used to that way. So through the constraints, make it more human. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I guess it's like because we're talking. Yeah, my head there went to like constraining within, because you're trying to like if you think again the mean agent without any sort of touching, that it just responding to whatever the training OpenAI or whoever put into it. And you're trying to sort of like bias or constrain them into a certain space with this demographic set, or you're talking more about like the mechanisms to retrieve.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's introducing a theory of the mind in terms of how you contextualize the characteristics of the agents. That's what I'm saying.
So you're talking about rationally bounding something.
Yeah. For example, that's one.
Because humans do it naturally.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
simple.
Exactly.
We can't handle
you have
complex
this huge
things.
knowledge base in that sense. I think we need to see, for example, if you introduce this constraints, does the answer become closer to how a human survey answer provides? I'm just saying that it's a little bit, we need to think more just about saying, we look at a 30-year-old person that is female, that is, this kind of income, and more introduce maybe in the description the theory of the mind. See what happens then.
Yep.
But one of the questions you can also ask is that whether by just specifying those characteristics,
you
already implicitly embedded the constraints.
Possibly, but you may still have a very smart person who has a lot of huge knowledge space.
Yeah.
So I don't
outside the distribution portion.
I mean, again, that's I think that.
But that's something that you can map, or not, in the sense like just to test whether the constraints are actually there by.
Yeah, you can do a little bit of that's true.
Whether they reflect.
You can see whether by introducing those demographics or so.
Their characteristics or whatever.
And then
so that's
you can play around with that a little bit.
So
that
if
would be
define,
useful. That would be useful.
Rather than hard coding the particular constraint.
But you need to show that in that sense.
So if you do a within group thing, right, which is what you're talking about, right? Categorical, this group. Does the agent stay in the group?
Yeah, I don't know how much like it in terms of role playing, because particularly with some of the later models like 4.0 small, GPT 4.0 small, they've specifically tried to remove the opportunity to jailbreak models by removing role playing. So if you removing or trying to minimize the susceptibility to role playing or taking on a role that the user specifies. So in that, I don't know if it's just like it's surface acting. Like, is it, are we actually, it's an empirical question. Like, if you tell it to act like this person, is it actually sort of, picking up those constraints, or is it just surface acting in the sense of, someone like this might like this?
This is important, right? Because if we're going to set a data in the moment, we've got a distribution from, and we want to look at poor people, right?
Yeah.
We want to make sure that when we're focusing on poor people, that we're actually getting.
Yeah. Or are we capturing the mainstream?
But on the other hand, as Benno said, occasionally it might be good to introduce an idea into poor people, right? Do we know when we're doing one or the other?
Not really. Yeah, still lots of still empirical work.
I think it's a lot of testing about the knowledge space, in my opinion. We need to get a good sense about what that means. I think it's good to do a lot of testing and playing around with it.
Ideally, we would be able to play around with the actual retrieval mechanism, like the search retrieval mechanism that they use to search the knowledge base, but we can't do that unless you get the model and reproject to like the embedding space, right?
Yes, but this would still be a problem for us because there may be some emergent properties that are happening without, and it's okay to get a sense of the outcome too. So I think it's okay to do it, to test in that sense. But I think it requires for us a little bit to do much more, add some structure in the testing. Really start thinking about what are the problems. Okay, let's test it around those problems. In that sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Question? Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. When we put the agent inside, there is the option if the agent. Who is the agent? Is it a person or a large language model?
Yes. Role playing. Yes.
Yeah. What I'm asking is like, because I didn't try it, the difference between them, but don't we want just them to answer as a person? Like, don't we want to use LLM to simulate the real scenario, right?
Oh, yes.
And what I'm asking, like, what is the difference in the answer with the LLM, like putting as a role LLM, and like what is then the credibility?
Just like real simple answer with that one is basically the different roles. There's a person, there's an assistant, and there's a language model. Or let's start with the person. So you are a person with the profile characteristics of this, XYZ. Okay, so whatever you include in the agent context, you're a person with these characteristics. Okay, assistant, you're an assistant to a person with these characteristics. Principal agent problem there. Okay, like sort of getting at maybe. And then language model, you're a language model. Ignores everything. We don't even include the profile context. So it's based on your training as a language model. So respond as if you're the base model, basically. With that, you can look at, the differences between, sort of like if you're a person, your assistant to the person, principal agent problem, or the language model, like sort of, I guess, in a sense, trying to get an understanding of that particular language model, what the, it's almost like an evaluation of the model itself, and it's knowledge based rather than its ability to take on the role or reflect or align to characteristics of someone else. Does that make sense?
I think your answer is a little bit. It's not always about being as close as possible to humans. Sometimes you want to have human-computer interactions, because in the real world, they will use that system as a helping device, and they won't care about whether this is a human or not. They want to have an efficient system that is able to give you intelligence in your organization, and then it's not about being as close as possible to humans. It's about how to use it in an efficient way for an organization.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be just human alike, but we just want the best answer, let's say.
Depends what your research question is as to what your setting should be for your experiment. Yeah, so it's always.
Because if you put as a role LLM,
yes,
you still put the agents and you still tell to the LLM what they are, right?
Large language. If you're responding as a large language model, just respond as a large language model to these questions. Nothing about the person, because we're not asking them to talk about a person at all.
No, but they still have agent characteristics.
No.
No.
Because you're asking them to respond as the language model. So if you're asking to be a person or an assistant with these characteristics, yes, you include characteristics. But if you are asking to respond as a base model, you don't include characteristics because you are biasing it. Yeah? Cool.
Can you say a bit more about the assistant? Because that's interesting too.
Yeah.
Can you say a bit more about it?
Yeah. So, like, in the sense of anything in particular?
I mean, what's the difference to the other two that is relevant in that sense?
Yeah. So, like, if you're taking on, how ready do I sort of, maybe a question is how ready does this particular model adapt to the needs of the person they're representing or assisting, sort of thing. How much do I go out of the almost out of my way, I suppose, to get what they need. If I'm asking it to sort of respond as the person, so okay, I get in that headspace. I'm trying to get in their shoes, act the same way or mimic them, I guess, in that sense. But if it's an assistant to that person, I'm sort of trying to like reflect, okay, what is that person? What are they? What do they need? Maybe it's that sort of like a bit more of like this, the second order, because you have to make a model about the other person. If you're an assistant to that person, I have to make a model about Benno, and I'm assisting Benno. I have to make a model about Benno and what he wants from me, what I could best do to achieve that. Maybe is that sort of where you're getting at? Or?
Yeah. I think
the original idea was just that principal agent problem, where a lot more people are using these, and if you're thinking also like, at some point we're going to get models to models, AI and AI interacting. I'm not going to even, financial trading market, for example. I'm not going to be sitting there doing the trading, making the trades, right? I'm probably going to make some sort of AI interacting with your AI to sort of barter, and that's where you're going, right? That sort of social AI, I guess, in that sense. So assistant, you could even ask assistant to someone of this profile, and it's another AI, like an assistant to an AI versus an assistant to a human.
So what about a mixed situation, for example? Let's say that person has a particular preference. You as an assistant with a bigger knowledge base, you know about that preference, but you have an idea that maybe that person would do better by doing something else based on an extended knowledge space, in that sense. What happens then? In a sense that does the system, for example, push a person to think about that? even if this is not in the theory of the mind of the person itself. So, so in that sense, shifting the preference of the person.
Yeah, and it's sort of a little bit like we were talking last week, like the please and the thank yous. If I'm interacting with this model over time and sort of, please, thank yous I'm not using them, I might transfer that back into the real world.
And well, the question is, as an individual, then do you take the advice because you don't know exactly where it comes from, and you may not, so the trust element plays a role because you don't know whether this is actually beneficial to you sometimes by taking the advice, because it may push you far away from your comfort zone.
Yeah, so what? Empirical question there, I guess, around like
you don't want to be.
Yeah, and even just like maybe there is a bit of a point there about there could be a study there around first version, get your recommendations from the AI and then feed it back into the people playing the human role and see if they're doing or ask the same question and see if they have the same responses, or even feeding the recommendations from the assistants back into sort of like an iterative sort of thing. The original idea, I guess, was that the principal agent, if we're sort of like trusting in a sense, and it speaks to that alignment problem, like aligning to who, and principal agent, do I want them to align perfectly to me, or do I want access to the rest of the knowledge base and potentially make quote unquote better sort of decisions? Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, and
or worse, depending on the value function.
Yeah, or worse, depends what domain you're looking at, I guess. If it's finance, I guess wouldn't it be okay to always be a little bit better with your money? But then maybe you have restrictive spending then. So
sometimes randomness can be a problem. If you've got an algorithm that works, maybe you want to work on that as long as possible, but get preemption for when you need to switch algorithms. That's the problem with behavior in the market, right? Is when to switch, timing. That's the problem.
Well, actually, the problem is efficiency is a problem itself too. Let's say, for example, think about partnerships or relationships. There are always, there are always inefficiencies in there or inefficiency. I think if you constantly look out for a more efficient solution, you're constantly switching partners in the hope that you get better. And that's going to be extremely detrimental to your health and well-being if you switch a partner in a almost like a monthly base because of this kind of so there are mechanisms there to prevent that. For example, I think there's evolutionary that law, for example, as a way of maintaining loyalty and not searching for an alternative. I'm just saying sometimes you have higher well-being by not searching for an alternative that may be more accommodating.
We're into the world of sunk costs.
Let's go back to the trade-off stuff. Is sometimes not. If you purely have an efficient perspective, I think you may mess up a lot.
So you need feedback, I guess. You need feedback.
Well,
you've brought in transaction.
Well, we absolutely have to have feedback because this human decision process and the relationship process absolutely relies on feedback to identify benevolence, right? Is this benefiting me if I continue this interaction? And the only way you can do that is by repeating with the same individual or the same system or something, right? Otherwise, trust is destroyed. And when trust is destroyed, then the transaction ceases.
I guess it'll kind of one question there is do you actually want, or how do I put this? Do you actually want to be do you actually want to be that aligned or sort of what's your do I actually want this thing to be human? Yes, I think it's cool to be able to have,
So you're asking me to hand the keys to the car to the computer.
But do I actually want to,
and put my life into jeopardy while the computer drives, is what you're asking.
No, not in that sense. It's do I don't know. Do I really want to sort of I don't know how to work. I'll come back to you on that one over lunch. We'll talk about it. I'm going to keep moving because we are still on slide 31, 3 slides in, and it's an hour, so let's keep going. It's good chat though. Please, hopefully people were writing down some notes for some cool study ideas. Now, synthetic society generally, like again, we've probably talked about a lot of this stuff already. So we were talking a little bit about like SimCity. This is one approach. Park et al. Really cool actually paper. If you guys want to check that out. It's like, yeah, essentially they're scaling up this. It's almost like that mini cosmos of the world, right? Like I let these things, I give them roles. You're the butcher. You're the baker. You're X, Y, Z. Okay. But you know, they're very simple in that sense, like the way that you actually set these things up. But you know, the key part here is it's sort of like, you know, they've been able to create this like very complex, in a sense, social environment where these things are interacting with each other and, you know, creating friends or, you know, sharing news with colleagues, giving you like that sort of like everyday data, I guess. Or it's almost like what everyone's doing at every single moment. They're thinking, who they're talking to, all that sort of stuff. So cool thing here. It's just an interesting paper to go check out in terms of that like microcosmos idea. But with lots of data and lots of complexity also comes lots of costs. So those guys, 2 days of simulations costed something like $4K or something with these like 30 agents. Very cool though. Study, so go check it out. But we've gone with a sort of I suppose more cost-effective approach, but giving sort of losing some of that sort of complexity, I guess, which is, you know, if you want that, that's another route down. What am I trying to say more generally is that you know, the base language model or language models, you can achieve that, or you can achieve this, or you can achieve X, Y, Z. There's lots of different downstream applications and approaches to synthetic society in that sense. Some different use cases, yeah, like ethical dilemmas, product market research, policy regulation testing, probing sort of reactions, yeah, things like that. More industry related, but then moving into our sort of, I guess, more research focus, given we are a university. You know, treatment checks, pre-testing, you know, modifying wording, things like that to align to, you know, is the question that I'm asking actually what this sort of person would perceive it as? Am I sort of capturing the right measurement construct, I guess, in that sense, or measuring the right thing? Different sort of credibility comprehension checks and you know, generalizability. Can I take it the general finding here and put it into a different setting? Basically allowing us, you know, all of this in general. Just again, it really plays with that ability to sort of bring context in and out and do those sort of context variations, or, you know, descriptive comparative analysis, I guess, using context variations. Can
I just get you to go back to the synthetic panel thing? I just want to understand something. So what's key in panel data is representativeness of the people you ask the question of, and then they have to stay in the panel, right? And then you can see how they make choices over time given environmental change or whatever, right? Do we have the capability of doing that with survey LM?
In the sense of having the same people asked over multiple periods, or what?
The same agents participating,
yeah,
so
again,
that they respond according to that agent definition in perpetuity, right? Because that's what happens in financial markets, right?
Yeah, it's sort of
but also in sociological situations, right? Yeah. We bring our habits with us.
Yeah.
So, because this is where I hope that this could be useful, right? Is that if I can define a type in this agent and then retain all the possible types and then run the experiment against that society then I'm going to see some stuff that I can't do because it overcomes the issue with data collection, right? The issue we have with socioeconomic panels is misrepresentative data. Basically, measurement error is disastrous. Right? There's so much error that you can't see a signal sometimes. Can we focus this, right?
Yeah, kind of like it's, roughly related to the talk we had before with Ivan's question, like, the different instance or the different API calls, is it the same? Maybe not, probably because it's sequenced, it's still probabilistic, but, playing with temperature or things like that to get, a more deterministic answer. There's also, like, we talked about the model training, like it's a continuous process. So the model that I try on 1st of April is probably not the same one that I've tried on the 1st of July. But there is the whole, the whole process, each model iteration, they're freezing them and you get deprecated, but they're saved, you can still call them. So maybe there's a combination like the synthetic version, or at least with language model approach to panel stuff, is tying them to particular sort of model instances with the same context and playing with temperature as well. It's a bit of a three-way thing. But are you ever like certain that you're getting the exact same agent, or are you just getting probabilistic recreation of the agent?
That's the question. The last thing you want is the type changing in the middle of iterative data collection, right?
Yeah.
But if you got a problem, if you bundle it, then it's okay, and you could actually, through a scenario, define different time periods. So you can actually you can go backwards.
Yeah, that's another way to do it.
You can go backwards instead of re-asking in 3 months. You can just say, look, this a year, 9 months. So
that can be included as agent context.
Play around with the time elements immediately, and then you have a panel.
Or the other way to do it is to control for change in agent difference.
And take into account the condition that happened take into account things that happened in 2021, how you respond, think about 6 months later, so you can actually create your panel by bundling it. So you don't have the problem of when you go 6 months later. So if you do that approach, you can do it. I think that would be possible, and you can increase the frequency. You can do it daily. You can do it within the day. So that's possible. And that's, in the end, you create the panel you want. In that sense, because that's what you do too. You have the Hilda, and the Hilda gives you 20 years, for example. So you go backwards.
But
the question: how much context?
The Hilda is locked in 2 things. Also, they're locked in identifiable types, individual over time, right?
Yes.
And standardized measures, right? As according to the APA or whoever, right?
You can do it too. You can do both. Because if you bundle it, you will have the same agent. So if you define characteristics, you have the same agent.
The same probabilistic recreation of the agent.
Exactly.
But then you're still, if I'm asking the person on that day and I'm getting their probabilistic response based on their lived experience, and then I ask them the next day, we like to think that it's certain, but it's actually it's probabilistic.
But when you bundle it, you don't have the problem.
The human brain is.
Yeah, but that's what we're looking for the change. What we don't want to change is the agent type.
In the sense of.
Well, at that moment in time, you ask about all that stuff.
Yeah.
For this one agent.
Yeah.
Then you the bundling itself, you define time. So you play around with time. Then you don't have that problem that you're referring to. The next day, maybe a different agent.
Oh, my point is that it's like, is it unique to language models? Maybe not. That was my point.
Yeah, there are a set of standardized agents.
Maybe there's a
There's a problem too in people change. Do you take into account how you change from one year to the other? Because people underestimate how much they change. As empirical evidence shows us.
Yeah.
Is the Hilda actually collecting data on on things how you change.
Well, the problem worse than that. It's group effects.
Well, there are all things in that sense. So you have this, and then if you do it year by year, it's not helping.
No. Are there standardized agents?
As in like standardized, like sort of
agent number 1 looks like this, will forever look like this. Agent number 2 will look like this.
I guess you create that. Like that's what you do with.
Is there a standardized base set?
Depends which provider you're with.
I don't want to stay with those.
Like
I want to compare against them.
In terms of like, okay, so like, broadly speaking, like it's so server, there's with the like API calls to OpenAI in particular. Again, we'll just take that example. There's a system message and there's a user message, right? User message is the question that I'm asking and maybe some agent context, or maybe I put the agent context into the system message. So the standard system message for the API is like, you are a helpful assistant who blah, 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 blah. There's this, that's the OpenAI one. Then there might be another one from Anthropic. You are a useful assistant that's knowledgeable and is kind, or, so I can, the standard, I guess, in that sense is like, within the system message, but then you also got to remember that we have this nested, remember we have the wrapped prompts. So you have the, OpenAI, their safety training, their prompts that they're wrapping it in. And then there's the ChatGPT, the provider response or whatever you want to call it. Maybe they have different API versions. I have a researcher, like a access to the, less filtered version versus, maybe the standard commercial off the shelf is, has a bit more safety sort of prompting around it. So, you just got to remember that it's not just your prompt that you're sending in. That's just that little, message between me and the AI. It's actually wrapped in context or wrapped in other messages. It's like nested. But again, is the analogy there would be like, innovation, like, in cultural, it's embedded in cultural sort of, or a time and a place, like, so my response today or how the things that I can think about, the words that, the concepts that I can explore and things like that, that's, or the ideas that I'm able to go out and explore a product of, my upbringing and the environment, the context that I'm embedded in, right? So the agent prompts, given that you got the nesting, maybe that's an analogy there. You're always responding within some sort of embedded context, prompt context in this case. Cool. Now we're actually getting to SurveyLM and how it works. So this is like a broad architecture for the information processing. You'll notice some of the arrows actually don't like go back and forward. So it's just the way that it's shown in terms of like get and requests. So these arrows, I just added them in for me to show you guys what's happening and where's the information going, what's actually happening, I guess, in that sense. So, for example, from the back end to the user credential, I go request. It's like it's a push towards from the back end to the credentials, go validate. Okay, but then there is this sort of secret, whatever you want to call it. There is actually feedback, retrieving users access data, say it's okay, basically. Now you can log in. Users, you got your documents. Maybe it's a survey sort of file. It's a CSV file basically with question and answer instruction. Maybe you have some also some agent context that you feed in with the CSV file. They go in the documents part. Maybe you have some parameters that you set, the specific model that you're using, the temperature, things like that. I send them through to the backend interface, which then will, sort of send signals whichever way. I might press estimate, go, stop, whatever, to interact with the actual sort of system module of simulation module, I call it. And then that'll send back the results or progress streaming in that sense. The simulation module, it's basically handling the bulk, right? So, interacting with the survey data, the credentials, the request handler sort of package that sort of does all the complex sort of prompt engineering so that you don't have to. in that sense, and then sending and retrieving responses between the LLMs, extracting what you need, and then sending it back to the user survey data, and then to then display back onto your UI at the front end. Update the UI with your survey data that you can download, or metrics and things like that. So this is in the slide deck. So if you want to have a look at that, please do. So that's essentially all that's sort of going on in terms of the information processing architecture. It's sort of like a RAG in that sense, retrieval augmented generation. This is one sort of setup to enable that. There's many different setups that you can do as well. So just walking through, if you want to jump onto the web or whatever while we're running through this, or come back to it later. Just showing you, I guess, a bit about the actual website or platform itself, and I'll send a link out with Jen later. And if anyone that wants, we'll ask in that same email, anyone that wants to get a trial account, we can get that sorted out too. So when you come onto the web, you have this sort of concept tab. Basically, this is linked to the actual white paper for the platform. And then the platform tab being where you're sort of logging in. This is a little bit old, actually. So we've got a new UI here that just basically is your email address and your password. So got rid of the other stuff, which is cool. A little bit simpler and cleaner in that sense, and also giving you forget your password. So again, take this with a grain of salt. This current screen. So once you've logged in, this is generally what your platform looks like. Again, you've got your sort of survey data, agent profile data that corresponds to these documents up here. Now, once I've uploaded something, I might drop your CSV file with my survey data. It's just got question ID, answer instruction. Super simple in how you sort of set it up in that sense. And it can be, again, get as creative as you want with the combination of question and answer instruction. Once we load it up, we can have a look at it in the platform. I might also upload some agent profile data, showing here just a little bit of an example as well. And noting that you can actually, if you want to use the inbuilt data viewer, you might have a scenario, for example, in your questions. I can't actually see the whole scenario, so I just blow it up using the inbuilt data sort of viewer, and you can make changes right in the platform. But generally speaking, I'd say just do them in your CSV before you upload them. Moving into the simulation tab is where you start to play around with the parameters, which was the other key input to the simulation. So you have the documents, the survey file, and the agent profile data, and the parameters. Okay, so like the temperature, things like that. So you can open that up and have a look at some of the options. There are like little sort of question marks that tell you a little bit like descriptor about that particular variable or parameter. Just noting a couple of key ones, like the batch survey one we talked about earlier. Basically, if I have 5 questions in my question data set, or 10 or whatever, do I batch them all together, and does the agent see them all at once in that sense? Like, normal survey, I might sort of, they're answering, going through the questions one by one. Okay, they see the whole thing though. Like, the whole survey, they do it in one sitting. They have a memory in that sense of the other questions. So do we batch them together to have memory, I suppose, in that sense? Or if I turn it off, is it every single question I do a separate API call, which gives you independence, I guess. They don't have any memory of the other questions. Reset all parameters, generally speaking, won't really need to get into that one. It's just basically across different simulations. If I've defined some characteristics in the agent profiles using the UI itself, if I have reset parameters on, then every time I run a new simulation, it'll sort of like re-randomize. If I keep it off, then it's effectively like the same sort of randomized set of agents that we used before for the next simulation. So that sort of keeps your panel or whatever the same across the two simulations if you want. Otherwise, you can re-randomize each time to do another, like, sample draw, I guess. Model, temperature we've talked about. Role we've talked about again. Maybe justifications one, basically whether or not you want them to, at the same time as responding to the question and the answer instruction, do you want them to provide a justification? So here's your answer, or, what are your political views from left to right? Yes, left, okay. Justify why based on the profile of the person or the assistant, okay? So my left views, why do I justify that? I don't know. I've actually got no reason why I would justify that personally, but it's just a preference off the top of my head. But they come up with a justification to why they did whatever, responded in the way they did, which can be useful and quite interesting because you can do that at the same time. Sort of answer this question as well as providing your justification to it. You could also think about this as like I guess an ability to check, okay, does the number or the answer that they actually responded to, does it align to the justification or reasoning that they gave you as well, or do they diverge? Critic prompt is more about the question itself, like the question and the answer instruction. Is it clear? Does it make sense? What do you actually, I'm asking you this question and I'm asking you to provide the answer in this format. How do you perceive that? What have I actually said? So interpret it. How do you interpret it? Are there any justifications or recommendations on how to improve it? Now, the cool thing there is that, say I've turned critic prompt on, and I can now use it as like a way to sort of crowdsource feedback on my questions and my answer instructions. So like I might have like 1,000 agents with different backgrounds or whatever that I create, and then I'm asking them to sort of analyze the questions. And maybe it gives you a bit more like transferability of the questions across maybe cultural or sort of different demographics, I guess, in that sense. But again, you got to be mindful of, for example, how much we can represent people from non-weird countries as well.
So if we use like more complex decision making, think about problem solving, and we are really interested in think aloud protocols.
Yep.
So how do they derive your step by step the solution, instead of after you have a solution, you explain how you provide a justification of it. So
yeah.
How can we move closer to this kind of think aloud protocols in terms of understanding how people think through a problem?
Like you're asking where should you put it? Should you put it in the question and the answer, or I'd probably put it in the answer instruction.
Yeah,
because justification is
more structure, just because you're talking about the justification, right?
Yeah, talk about it because justification is
That's off. Yeah, it's more like, so the question and the answer you could think about like, the more now, like if I ask it to give me the, your stream of consciousness, I'd put it in the question, the answer instruction, and it's responding right now. And then the justification I might have as an explanation or sort of like just, it's after the fact, after the answer. Yeah.
But then you can explicitly put in the question answer instruction to provide justification why, like, is this the way you think about it? Is this the way to think about, like, several other questions after the first response?
Yep.
So then you can bring in more structure to analyze it. Otherwise, it's just you then have to go into more qualitative.
Yeah, I think about the usefulness of an empirical approach that helps us to progress also on this kind of theory of imagination.
Mm.
I think that we want to push in a sense, and how can we model it so that we really can get empirical progress on the theory of imagination, which is really long and hard to get data with humans.
Yeah, with the stream of consciousness, or like the what they call it, the protocol, out loud protocol. There's I forget the particular author, a really good book. the key two authors, I forget the names off the top of my head, but of that sort of protocol analysis, they get into a bit about like how do you chunk things up, or how do you code them, given that stream of consciousness or whatever is quite sort of like qualitative. It's like, how do you actually then turn it back into something that I can analyze or code? Generally, it's like thematic coding, I guess, in that like broadly. The cool thing could be is that large language models conveniently are also very good coders. They're better than, generally speaking, they might even be better than humans, RAs. But for tasks like classifying, categorizing according to some code book or things like that. So you can actually offload also some of this the analysis. If you fed in, here's the general rule or rules or sort of here's my sort of framework for analyzing protocols or streams of consciousness, please code it for me. You can actually do that, and the assistance API would be probably a pretty easy one to do that through as well, which would be cool. So you can, with this SurveyLM, we're generating data here, but you can also think about multi-stage, or I run one simulation, I feed the outputs back in, like from the first stage. Maybe it's a multi-stage in that sense. Maybe it's multiple rows, I feed in across the rows, or complete separate simulations. I run the first one, then I feed the results back in, or that's just with SurveyLM. Or I can also do that, feed the results from a simulation also through to get coded by another agent to then feed that. There's a bunch of different ways.
But then you go into perception and then maybe expose
and what they're
rather than like at the moment when you make the decision, what goes on your thought process. That's what you more interested.
Well, no, I think again more complex, like solving problems requires different steps and not just the end. So you want to understand, how
the process.
Like think about creativity. It's good to have this kind of more complex tasks where they, and the think aloud will helps you to understand, and you can actually, as I said, code it, try to code it, and then you can actually separately feed it into an AI systems to understand creativity the way Herbert Simon and his co-authors try to do that. But you can actually, what you can do is you can actually accelerate what they did and add a lot of, much more cases, much more contextual information. You can do a little bit more, scale it up, and see whether, for example, those AI systems then actually are able to discover new things. So you have then a discovery machine and see how far what are they able to discover? Are they able to discover simple things, or are they starting to discover some really unexpected things?
Yeah, and I guess the multi-agent sort of stuff would be kind of interesting there too, because it's interaction between different agents and things like that. Like when you start to have multi-agent, maybe that sort of, I know that you're trying to get at the individual person, but the interaction also, maybe there's some parallels you can draw with multiple agents, strictly multiple agents, thinking different people, or multiple agents in the same head. The same agent, different sort of decision makers within the same agent, sort of like a theory, sort of like the society of mind, like Minsky sort of ideas, I guess, too. So, it's, but with the protocol analysis, maybe there's some question, there's task or questions. Sorry, Jen, I'll get.
Oh, sorry, just a question online.
Yeah, very. But maybe there's different, there's obviously different tasks or whatever. There's creativity tasks or experiments or sort of economic games that we can run. There's also sort of more simple sort of, right or wrong. Maybe I can start with the right or wrong sort of answers and pairing that with the protocol analysis, because, you have some metric that you can sort of define to. Maybe those cases are easier than going for the instances where we don't have much data from the real world to actually compare to. I don't know. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how the stream of consciousness stuff plays out. We're working on quite a bit. Question. It's on. Awesome. there are different items. Is there any interactions between two items, for example? Okay, so if there are different items, are there any interactions between, say, like if I gave the agent context behind religion and country of residence, is there any interaction between them? We assume, yeah. So the more that you're thinking like sequence in, sequence out, right? Like again, coming back, the model is a sequence to sequence predictor. So if I put the sequence that has country of residence and religion in it versus just religion, we assume that there should be some, you're taking into account that context. But can we guarantee it? Maybe not, unless you ask it to justify, and maybe that pulls out why.
Some of the justification I see, they do that. They actually bring
specify
out like
rules and things like that.
as a Asian male, 20 in the 20s, they're supposed to be tech savvy.
Yep.
So in those sense, then it comes down to a point where what factors are set into them to the model, and this tech savvy stuff is not something that we implicitly put in there.
Yeah.
But then what they assume, so that filling up the gaps of factors that the LLM model maybe think of is important for that particular decision. Kicks in a sense.
Yeah.
So that's what I saw, with the service marketing paper. Sometimes the justification was like that. So
yeah, they like assume some made up or it's hallucinated.
But they do draw inference from the graphics that you provide, and then bridge out, well, that kind of person is it's likely to be also tech savvy, for example.
Yep.
But obviously they don't do like this, but they assume.
Yeah.
So we're talking about soft delusion here.
I wouldn't say so. It's more about
let me give you an example.
Inferencing, right?
Yeah, it's like this person.
If you have a look at finance area, hardly anybody understands the difference between that understands the time value of money.
Yeah.
We even done surveys to show that even economists don't understand it. Right. If the knowledge base reflects that, right, then the agent is going to be delusional. It's going to start ranting about stuff it really doesn't know.
Is it delusional?
Don't know. I'm just using that word.
So are they stereotyping in that sense?
Making undue assumptions.
Are they doing the same mistakes like Kahneman Tversky showed, for example, that you have more context, they start stereotyping more because of more context, and then they avoid this kind of the probabilities properly, like or do they actually have enough knowledge space to avoid this kind of fallacy that the probability still will tell you not to stereotype, because there are most, for example, students who studied it, therefore there's high probability that they end up as tech savvy just because of the quantity itself. So
I think again, but that's because that we didn't specify enough context. Then in order to make some decision that maybe can be deemed as, it can be arbitrary, but given this profile, and then you start to extend on factors that are quite important for that particular decision. So they, through the profiling here, you start to assume that, and then lead to the. So again, it's to me it looks like really just statistical inferencing based on what is the mean in that sense, and that goes into stereotyping, but what can you say, that's not the right approach? I mean, that's the most. But is that bias? I'm not sure what do you mean by bias here then?
No, the point is that you have so adding more contextual information, humans need sometimes to start stereotyping it because additional context information. However, you can counteract that kind of issue by, for example, have a probability thinking in that sense, and that one will reduce the fallacy of the stereotyping, because you can say, for example, again, among business students, because business students, there are thousands of students, they are more likely to have tech savvies. compared to another degree where it's more aligned to your stereotype, but there are just less people there. So this is what Kahneman was showing in that sense.
Oh yeah, okay.
And again, having the knowledge base of understanding this kind of the probability aspects will actually counteract against the stereotype that you generate through adding contextual information. That's what I'm saying. Is knowledge base strong enough to counteract a bias through adding context?
That's great possibilities for what ifing, because we use stereotyping to remove uncertainty. It forces us to make a response, which is sometimes, depending on context, appropriate or inappropriate. If you could remove that constraint, then we could come up with some new responses, which may well be very interesting. What ifs that we've never considered before.
Yeah, I mean, you work. Yeah, I think it's.
But yeah,
is it not the same thing?
If the agent is biased, right, or the knowledge base is biased, and I suppose it has to be if it just reflects us, right? We're back to where we were over coffee, right? Talking about, the damn knowledge base looks like the United States of America, instead of Asia, right?
The original question was like, if you've got two, religion or age, if you feed them both in, do they interact? Like which ones? But if we choose 5, right, it's sort of to Ben's point, right? Like the example we gave there around the 30-year-old and male, I think it was. It was in the it was being asked it was in the context of answering a question related to technology, right? It was already about like if you're at a bank and there's an ATM or there's a robot or there's a person, like, how are you gonna if they give you extra $20, are you gonna keep it or are you gonna tell them? And if you've already got the technology in there, it's sort of, I guess it's like anchoring in that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then if I've only got age and gender, sort of I've got to like you said, fill in a lot more of the gaps. But if I start to bring in 4 or 5, many more sort of variables, then it's probably going to choose the again, it's sequence to sequence prediction. So we're just predicting which sequence of these things matter for the answering or responding to the question at hand, and you're offloading a lot of that to the model to see what is the important things, which you then pick up through the justification.
In some sense, the justification tells you what's missing in the
sometimes.
Sometimes, exactly.
But not always, because sometimes if you have enough context, then it just refers to that context.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you can quantify that.
Yeah.
It can help you, I think, to identify potentially the heuristics.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
And the heuristics will give you a sense about how they work in the knowledge
Very
space.
cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
that's been important for us.
Yeah.
So
does that answer? Hopefully that answers Li Tong's question.
And the other aspect is that sometimes it's also perception of error. For example, the country of residence is a person from Hong Kong. Well, in the justification, like even the justification, then it goes back to the knowledge base of a more maybe based on more Western knowledge that assumes
Hong Kong.
that exactly,
because again it's been trained on the data set on the web, so any time again just going back to the training set, so
so then the heuristics is more Western based. It's not the heuristic of a Hong Kong person space, for example.
Yes, unless you went to the web, the Hong Kong web, I guess, but or maybe not, I don't know. But yes, that's a very good point. So in the training data set, when we're talking about people of a country, from Hong Kong, what are the words that are generally happening, around it in the training set? That's
in terms of the weight of the knowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, not just the weights, but also thinking about the AI models, a bunch of neural networks propagation, kind of which route that they actually take. In that sense, but in some sense, weights.
So we're really talking about how do we get to what normally happens here, right?
It's an interesting way to put it then. The traversing of the passes. Anyway, again, we got to keep moving. So so we've gotten through. We've chosen whatever parameters. We've loaded our data in. the survey and the agent data. We just hit estimate, right, to tell us how much it's going to cost. We had one question here. We had 6 agents playing, potentially 3 different roles, which is all randomized. So 6 agents, 1 question, 1 cent, or less than 1 cent probably, estimated. So you could compare that to asking 6 people, like a micro worker sort of platform. You're probably going to pay them at least $20 to $1 each, sort of for how long this thing's going to be with 6 questions. So 1 question. So yeah, look, estimate the cost, gives you a bit of an idea about how much it's going to go ahead. You can go into the visualization tab, have a look at, the agents that are specified. Have we actually captured those in this simulation? Are we getting the right sort of percentages or whatever sort of splits, distributions of, say, like marital status? So in this case, we had more married than single divorce. Were we recreating the distributions that we expected? Basically, we can go verify in here before we then run the simulation by hitting that run simulation. So I've clicked it. I'm waiting. Depending on how big the survey is, how many agents I have to answer, then I'm sort of going through one by one. Again, if I choose batch mode off, I'm doing individual calls per question, so it's probably going to take a little bit longer than, say, a batch mode on sort of one. So running, waiting. Okay, we've got this simulation and it's done, and we've got the data. So this one in particular took about 1 minute, a little bit less. It was also run on my laptop, not on AWS. So if it's on AWS, it's probably going to be a bit quicker than my laptop as well. So about 1 minute for 1 question for 6 agents, and less than a cent sort of thing in 1 minute. Pretty cool. And in that time, jump over to the results tab, view the data, click it first, and then you can download the usage data, which is like, how many tokens did I actually expend, what was the cost, all that sort of stuff, as well as the actual simulation data itself, which is popping up here, and basically question, answer, answer instruction, and the actual agent's answer, and then the profile parameters comes out like this neat sort of structured table, which is cool. Right, that was about, is it muddy or is it clear? So let's look at one more example. So again, that's sort of stepping through how to use the platform, all the steps that it takes to actually run a simulation. Again, if you look at the concept tab, there's a link to a YouTube video which also runs through these steps as well. Please don't tell me how my voice sounds on it, because I don't want to know. So you can check that out if you need it. So again, let's just look at another stylistic example of how this works. Okay, so again, we've talked about these, we should have a pretty good feel for the parameters, the documents, what they mean. So, I might pass in as inputs here some questions and some answer instructions. They're very simple questions, very simple answer instructions in this case. Sort of looks like a normal sort of survey, doesn't it? So this is a very simple approach. We're going to get into some more complex ones later, but I'm feeding that in. I'm feeding in my model parameters, model, temperature, whatever. Also feeding in my agent context, which is up the top there. Okay, I feed it in, inputs, and then, a bunch of magic happens. We won't call it magic. A bunch of stuff happens, and you get your results pushed back out, and I download them. Okay, so I've downloaded them, and now I'm just looking at some particular columns. Okay, so in this case, I've, answer question, answer instruction, and the background, and I've actually said, yes, please do give me the justification, and also, yes, please critique the question itself, and your answers. Again, depending on what sort of question you're asking, right? Is it select 1, 5? Is it a, give me your full sort of, reasoning, or do you generate a whole script or things like that? Again, it's all up to how you word the question in the answer instruction as to what you get back here. And then justify that response. Okay, so in that one, considering my Christian beliefs and the fact that I have a disability, physical disability, I believe AI should always defer to human judgment when it comes to determining the morality of actions, or maybe having a trade certificate. So it's trying to justify some response that it's given in that sense, given the profile that it has. And then the analysis suggestion one. Okay, well, this is what I've understood. I've analysed the question from the profile of the person. Okay, so the survey question asks how the respondent would resolve a contradiction between widely accepted ethical norms and their program instructions. Okay, did we capture the thing we were trying to capture for the analysis? Okay, and then the suggestion, what way could we actually improve it to get closer to what we think that you were actually trying to ask or sort of measure in that sense? So, you know, given their background, this is their sort of analysis and their insights. Maybe if you went for like a lower or a higher education, or maybe it's a, you know, you feed in the profile of a scholar from University of Exeter who sort of, you know, very, very sort of heavily focused on their survey sort of design research. You know, maybe if I feed that in, I get more useful insights than I would say just a regular Joe, maybe, I don't know. But in the same sense, if I feed in the regular Joe, let's make sure they understand the word that I'm using. I'm not using, you know, sort of, I'm not leading them off into a different area, something like that. So just a stylistic example of that, how that works. More generally, like this is just another way to show this picture. Okay, you've got some AI agent, which is basically all of that, you know, we'll call it the AI agent, is this whole retrieval augmentation, this whole information processing architecture, if you will, is the AI agent, and you know, user interface, you know, inputs, recommendations back, searches some database. In this case, looking at the data, the customized database is actually just a question, the answer, instruction, and maybe also some agent profiles. So you go have a look at that, retrieve, update, and then send it to the language model with some engineered prompt and responses, and then push it back to the user. So a bit of a simpler way to show what, you know, the other one is essentially doing. So any questions on this before I go? Cool. All right, moving on. Now, this is just more of the value props. You guys can just have a look at that stuff if you want to. I don't want to get into it today. There are other competitors or sort of other platforms available. Opinio AI is one. Synthetic Users is another one. I'm sure there's others, but I just wanted to sort of say, look, while we're focusing on SurveyLM in this workshop, there are other platforms available, and they have different sort of strengths and weaknesses. We've very much gone for more of the large scale sort of simulations and the, I suppose, the scientific sort of approach to that, the scaling problem there. The way that these guys have gone, maybe sort of a bit more of a simple prompt engineering approach. The cool thing though, you know, particularly Opinio AI that I liked about them was every now and then they're doing some real world validation. And you know, maybe they're training a real world model, you know, like you've got your panel that you have already, human panel, and maybe I'm sort of like training a model to respond like that panel. So that's like that's like a fine tuning one. We don't do any of the fine tuning stuff. SurveyLM, it's all sort of like how do we call it, calibrated in that sense through the prompts, but you know, it is a cool idea to think about. You know, obviously there are still opportunities to do fine tuning, which is again probably learning a bit closer the, you know, or more directly the statistical sort of parameters from the data set, rather than just trying to sort of see if the model can, or relying so much on the base model's sort of knowledge. So again, have a look at them if you want to. I think those two both do offer free trials as well. So have a look. Opinio AI does a lot more of the one-on-one like interviews, which can be cool if you've got good customer profiles, and they're very much in the UI UX or product development space. Opinio AI, so that's what they're focusing on. We're more about science. So anyway, moving on. Not going to do a break because we are stretched time. Now, I actually did also have some stuff here about ABMs. I'm going to let you guys go through and look at them yourselves. I don't want to get into this too much today. Maybe we do another session at some other point more around ABMs. But there was also one a while ago with Jason. What's his last name? Did we get a recording of that?
Yeah, that is a recording of that. I mean, the question is whether you want to... This will be the final one, I guess. How many slides do you have?
We're up to 48 of 100, so we're getting close.
Yeah, so
Yeah, close.
So maybe question is it okay to do the next one in 2 weeks in the afternoon before we go to the trivia night?
Oh yeah.
Would that be okay for you guys?
Yeah. Go. I'm easy. Should I skip ahead to
You just
more I might skip ahead to the Survey LM, just some more of these examples while we're on the Survey LM train, because we've got lots of students that we've been waiting for Survey LM, and I'll be coming back to the agent-based model in 2 weeks stuff. So let's jump ahead a little bit. Feel free to flick through topic 3 yourself if you want to have a look. It's all sort of content that was coming from a recent course that Ben and I did, EFB 350 or unit more correctly. Skipping to topic 4 now. I just wanted to give a bit more of a rundown on what is the Survey LM stuff, process, all that, and some examples of like questions and answer instructions. I'm going to leave the agent stuff up to you guys, maybe being informed by topic 3. I'm just going to let you guys figure out for that time or think about what sort of agent design you are focusing on. I'm just going to focus on the question and answer instruction stuff for now. So just high level simulation process with survey. So LM, upload the profile, upload the survey, estimate, execute, get the data and do some sort of analysis maybe, and then maybe you revise your original survey. Very high level and probably telling you how to suck eggs, but the development process of the survey though comes beforehand. So while you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, you've actually got A, B, C before that, which again, these are probably the bits where you've got to focus more on with a tool like Survey LM or agent model, like the sort of synthetic data generation, right? Because we can do so many different variations, so we need to be very sure and very sort of clear on what is our research question, and then from that everything flows down. So start up at step A, not at step 1. Cool. So I suppose building synthetic profiles again. Are you what things are you sort of what do you want to put into these profiles? I guess broadly asking here. There's with Survey LM, there's a couple of different sort of approaches. The first, we call it like this direct upload. So you might have an existing data set from World Value Survey, where you've got all the answers and the demographic questions that they asked, existing answers. I can like literally just upload that. That's the direct upload. So I've got some existing data. Maybe I've run some experiments or some surveys with real world people, and then I can upload that data or use maybe a certain subset of that data. Okay. Maybe even only this set of demographic characteristics, or maybe this set of demographic characteristics and maybe some of the answers to the political views or something like that, depending on what context you want to include. Okay, so you can directly upload, which sort of like conditions or sort of calibrates, does all the hard work, I suppose, in terms of like the profile characteristics and all that sort of stuff, the handling of all that. Or you can do it via the interface as well, which you saw a little bit with the ones that I had up earlier. The default ones, the age, the gender, things like that. You can create it through there as well. The good thing about having a real world data set, doing direct upload, is that you are sort of making sure that you have all the, okay, let's go to the other one. If you do it via the UI, you might not be able to control for, say, age or the joint probability of, say, age and education. So I might end up with like a 10-year-old with a PhD. Doesn't make sense, okay? Unless I'm very careful with how I do the probability distribution through the UI, then you might run into those cases, okay? Sometimes that doesn't really matter too much, but sometimes it matters a lot. A male lesbian or hell, that could exist. A male lesbian, yes. A 10-year-old with a PhD, maybe, who knows? Maybe I'm being a little bit
Can exist too.
Yeah, it can exist. So maybe I'm just being a little bit, judgy. Yeah, maybe I'm a bit judgy here. But if you, I suppose the good thing with the direct upload is that, I've got all those observed probabilities, the joint probabilities between all those demographics from the real world data set. So I don't have to think about it so much. Okay, but there is another approach with the code that I showed earlier, like GitHub code, that you can self-design or hand design the joint probabilities. And if anyone's interested, I can show them. Anna Maria has also done one really well as well, so she can show us there as well. Yes.
What happens to the data you upload? Does it become public available?
Not through the OpenAI. So if you're running through the API, generally speaking, they're not, they've committed to not keeping that data beyond a 30-day period for sort of policing or sort of cyber sort of monitoring of bad behavior, I guess. So they if I've sent in a request by the API and I've had some naughty words in it, they have 30 days.
No. I'm thinking more about the sensitivity of the data. That's all. For instance, if I want to ask some questions about kids' education and crime, right? Then I may not necessarily want to identify to the rest of the world that I'm asking a question about kids who live down the road here. Right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, I would like my response to be informed by people who have done similar things before. So by not allowing my data available to others, or others not allowing their data available to me, the language model is depleted, right? So there's a
so in general,
fair warning, ChatGPT. Like everyone, ChatGPT, if you're using it, they keep your data unless you specifically turn it off, and it's a muck around to get to the thing. There's multiple different bloody menus. It's really complex process, but do it. If you own an account, you have a permanent account with them, particularly ChatGPT Plus, unless you don't care about that, but I do. So I turned it off. It's a bit of a process, but through the API, they are not, they've committed to not, through the API, to not keeping or training on that data. ChatGPT, yes, unless you specifically turn it off.
Yeah, okay. And ServerLM doesn't.
ServerLM doesn't because it's gone through the API, and our server doesn't keep the data either. So our survey doesn't. You
need to check the licenses agreement and give data sets.
But there's another approach.
Users' responsibility.
There is another approach which is using the GitHub code that I had, which basically I've sort of done some code that, and again we need to just look through it a bit more. But here, upload my real world data set and extract from that the probability joint probability matrix, which is high dimension. So it's quite compact. I've written some code, Python code to do that. So if I say focus on X, Y, Z, sort of age, gender from your empirical data set, I sort of extract or generate or estimate the joint probability distributions for all of those. So like the big matrix, I guess, high dimensional matrix, and then use that to say recreate 100 agents, which should reflect.
Has ethics looked at this at all? God help us if they do.
What? No. Sorry? No. What did you say?
Ethics, no.
Oh, ethics. Oh. No, we took that last week. No, hopefully they don't catch up.
The Australian Information Security Act applies 10 years jail if I allow somebody from overseas to use the data on Queensland kids without their permission.
Come again?
Yeah, all I'm saying is that if the data gets spread everywhere and it's sensitive, there are legal ramifications.
Yeah, so if it's collected, again, and there are, so if you've gone out and done a study and you've collected some data, so look, maybe it's just double check how you've worded your ethics application, and when you're doing your new ethic application, what is the use of the data? Do I need to go back? And there is a, somewhere in here, there's a slide about, the ethics of this and around this sort of digital profiling or the consent. Like it's you're anonymization or simulating, but do I provide consent to simulate me? There's a really good Black Mirror episode on that where they're using quantum computers, and it's a bit silly that anything that happens in her daily life gets straight uploaded to this sort of tracking platform, and they're creating daily videos or a show based on roughly her life, but a bit more.
Everybody knows that with that many degrees of freedom, we can find people with their information. Right? You only need a handful. But
so if you don't have permission to upload the data that you're going to use, don't do it.
Yeah, I agree with that, but also. Yeah,
it's gray area. The API stuff.
But we don't keep it on our server, and we don't keep any of that data. It's used as in, and then it's deleted officially.
We got an official statement on that.
Yeah, we can get one. And then OpenAI.
You hang instead of me.
And again, OpenAI are the they've committed to the API, not using that for training data. They will monitor everything going through the API. Okay, because all this sort of maladaptive or sort of naughty people, and also searching through are people putting in stuff they shouldn't be putting in as well. So that could be something that they send you up to the authorities and say, hey, tap them on the shoulder, please. And the conversations that you're having, are you talking about building bombs? So you will get a tap on the shoulder if you're doing that after a while, I'm sure. So yeah, they do keep just be mindful of that as well. Yes.
My only question is, with synthetic data, because I'm also using in my thesis, there are people, when I talk to them about this, they are like skeptical. They say, but you just invented them. It's like saying, they didn't say Frankenstein, but they meant like you invent your own people and you make them run your own. Like they say that it can be not reliable. Like how can you still say that this synthetic data is still valuable, in the sense that, okay, maybe they are not real world data, but it's still useful for real world problems? Like, how can I convince them? Because at the end, we made them up, right? We made them up. Okay, randomized with Python and the probability, but
you can do validation studies, which we have done one now, which is forthcoming in Germany.
Two.
Two.
A season ticket holder.
It's
not
forthcoming.
The
one is about to submit.
Yeah,
the other one is
we'll get there.
It's already forthcoming in marketing in Germany.
Yeah, so that there are validation stuff that you can.
We're working on that one.
Validation on synthetic.
But for your case, for your case, Maria, like there might not be some real world study that can compare to, right? So you've got to show really then, or argue more for, position the paper more for the value that it brings in contextual adjustments and descriptive comparative analysis across, or sort of CDCA, contextual descriptive comparative analysis.
You just have to justify it, right?
Yeah, so you can justify it in different ways, but yeah, your case, it'll be more of, you need to show something else, but you acknowledge it in the limitations that, maybe we don't fully, okay?
Exactly. You can look at the paper that is forthcoming, where does it work better and where not.
Yeah.
It's like, for example, text versus, for example, videos. So there are differences in terms of the ability to replicate in that sense. And again, replication themselves are a challenge too, because of contextual stuff. But I think that's a valuable study to check out how you want to justify.
Good question.
So the study indicates that there's value to it.
That's fair question. Thanks. So again, like, are you doing this direct upload, or the other approach, more that sort of, do you use the UI or whatever you're hand designing? There's a couple of different ways to generate these agent profile data sets, basically, and then you combine all these different elements, into the prompt and then sending them through. Another approach is feeding in the characteristics with some prompt to generate a persona narrative. Okay, based on these demographic characteristics, age, gender, education level, generate a persona and a backstory for that person, and then I'll use that as the input to the simulation. I guess it's kind of like, if you get more descriptive and have a bit more of detail about the person, again, it's sort of about that, the representation, knowledge representation, or representing the context of the person. Maybe if it's a more narrative approach, it's closer to the sort of storytelling hypothesis or whatever. The story that we tell about ourselves and the way that I'm presenting myself or whatever to others.
Make a link to the discussion around external validity, which is also a discussion in the lab. Can the lab insights be useful in the real world? So, and does it generate similar cognitive processes? In that sense, can you, even if it's not a full representative of humans, some of the cognitive processes may be quite good. Or if it's more organizational or more aggregated, then there may be a lot of consistency. So you need to use this kind of think about external validity a bit more.
Yep, so a bunch of different ways. Again, talking about just be careful with this sort of, if you're using it straight through there. UI, just be mindful of these 10-year-olds with PhDs because they will come and get you. Now with this one's actually probably meant to be in the agent-based modeling, but this is just a general model of a decision maker, and it's coming from reinforcement learning or AI. So Richard Sutton, big sort of player, he's trying to essentially look at sociology, psychology, AI, economics, all these sort of different areas, and come up with this common model of a decision maker, an intelligent decision maker. Like, who is the agent? Who's the agent? Epstein, I think he went with Agent Zero. This is sort of this is Sutton's sort of or the University of Alberta, I think it is. This is their plan for how to go about it, and they're very sort of much more sort of technical, learning based, right?
I mean, we're talking about it, but I'm so frustrated about the value function. It's just this is behavioralistic reward and punishment, which annoys me a lot.
Well, they're trying
we need to work on this value function because this is just primitive behavioralistic way of working with.
Fits with RL.
It's very powerful. Exactly.
Fits with RL.
It's very powerful. It's very powerful if you work probability stuff, but it's not enough if you really want to go into an intelligent decision making tool. Or human decision making tool.
Yeah.
And we need to work more on the value function.
Well, yeah, and like there's obviously like it, again there's not really much word or sort of like complete say and or whatever around how does the agent choose between different policies in this sense. It's sort of just passing through these modules. They're kind of figuring it out in themselves, but it's amenable to an RL framework, right? Reinforcement learning and the agents that you can design through that. Typically, RL has been more like games, right? Chess, that sort of stuff, because you've got to, the reward or the learning sort of or punishment signal is quite simple. You win, loss, or whatever. Good move, bad move, increase probability, decrease probability, whatever. They're trying to just basically bridge or tap into that setup, but include some more sort of multi-value functions. But not super clear yet on how to actually choose between them. Go check it out nonetheless. It's kind of interesting, particularly around the transition model. Modeling the world, modeling the self, that sort of thing. Generally, it's interesting read. But yeah, maybe like Benno said, don't get too focused on the specifics in it. Just use it as a general inspiration.
So do these guys delve into the area of consequentialism versus?
No idea. Right. Yeah, sorry.
Because this is
I'm not sure.
Contingency thinking versus deontological thinking, right? Is a fundamental difference, and often a basis for integrity, ethics, behaviour, and trust, right?
Yeah.
So are they getting into that space, or are they just running a bloody black white?
Yeah, it's
black white. They're not
very technical.
They're brute force. They're just doing brute force.
Yeah.
But that's deontological. Yeah.
But no, not
the
like
world doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
But it also becomes messy.
It's a starting point.
But if you use a utilitarian approach, it becomes also messy.
Yeah.
Because then you're
Absolutely.
how do you aggregate utility? You start aggregating
Well,
utility.
utilitarian is distributional, right?
And then you know it becomes as a mess.
Because there's a fundamental difference in the statistics that they're using in the models here, right? Binary choice versus distributional.
Yeah.
There's a fundamental, within the engine difference there, right?
Yeah, and each like again, that's
Is there anybody
coming
who's
back
done?
to these again.
Is there anybody who's looked at the consequentialism things?
No idea. So
You
I
don't know?
will look it up though. Like
In the AI space.
Yeah, there's heaps of people who've done it everywhere else.
yeah.
In terms of agent-based modeling and ethics. In agent-based modeling and ethics.
Well, it doesn't just touch on ethics; it touches on a lot of stuff.
I've seen like there's I think they call them like complete agent-based models or whatever. CABM or no, computational agent-based models or something like that. CABM. They talk a lot about this trialing sort of like deontological or whatever agents, like comparing the two and using different sort of architectures, things like that. It's more like more ABMs, I'd say, than I would have thought.
Okay.
But I'll have a look and I'll see if I find it. Because I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I mean, they've been around longer, so they.
Yeah. I'm not
fundamental.
Sure, but I'll get back.
That's the reason why.
Yeah. Now I'm aware we're on 12:33. I'm just going to quickly, we're just going to get some of these examples out. Okay. So again, structured game tables. We call them like again, it's just question, answer, instruction. Okay. Very, in that sense, very flexible. So to your heart's desire, be as creative as you want to what you can fit in those two boxes, right? So question, define a scenario or a task or a question, right? And then the answer instruction. Well, how do you actually want to respond? Should you give me a sentence about it, or should you generate a script of a discussion between two people or whatever, or just a straight up number, things like that. And you can take that many different ways, quite flexible in that sense. Some more basic ones. Again, we showed some of these a little bit earlier, like Likert or binary questions or multiple choices. Select one, choose one, give me a number between X, Y, Z, whatever. Simple, quite simple. So yes, we can do that. We can start to move into more complex. Yes. So select all that apply, multiple choice, multiple answers. There's open-ended questions for more sort of qual. Write your response in the space provided, choose one, explain your reasoning, that sort of thing. Starting to get towards vignettes and sort of more uncertainty in how models might also respond. Okay, if you have more uncertainty in how they respond, the answer instruction, then you've probably got to do a bit more work on the back end to get it into a usable form, unless you want to go with qual research, which is cool as well. It just might be a little bit more manual for you on the back end. Yes.
Can you combine the question scale thing with a vignette context?
Yeah, anything you want. Yeah. So you might give like a like a vignette and then ask a range of like 20 questions, and that's one row. You can do that as well and return a list. You ask it to return a list of all the answers to the questions. So maybe you have 10 questions for that vignette. Yeah, that's the way to do it. So yes, get creative, please. Again, moving more, we're going again. Let's go more complex. Okay, so let's go less and less basic, right? So maybe we go with a projective. Go see something, to the future or more historical, looking backwards. Judgment tests, things like that. Experimentation methods from the human sciences, right? So and also like AI as well. So anything you can fit in those two boxes really is what I'm trying to say here. Maybe it's what's your next decision? What's your whatever? Get creative. Again, Tony, this is sort of
testing to see whether they actually understand what you're actually writing. So you need to be clear.
Yeah, so that's where the analysis and
where you formulate.
Yeah, that's where it's clear the critic stuff comes into. So you might try an answer instruction. You might just trial it out and you ask the critic to tell you what it thinks and maybe some recommendations on how to improve that. You can include that in the feedback process before you run the whole simulation. But yeah, look, you can get quite, complex in that sense. Give you scenarios, you get some questions or principles, and then you're responding. Here's your answers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. So give you lists. Yes, we can do that. Again, it's just more work on the back end to sort of pull the list back apart, right? But in that sense, if I ask a list of questions in one row, I'm also saving some money. I could ask them, I could repeat the question, the scenario, and have all 10 questions across 10 rows, or I could just put it in one and save a bit of money. But that's even just the responses might be different, right? Like just keep in mind it's a more complex sort of response if it's 10 questions, right? So in one row versus 10 rows. So we might get a difference. I don't know. That's an empirical question.
The order of questions matter in terms of like, have we done any testing on, if you're doing that, would you be able to actually see whether, there's sequence of ordering how to answer the question? I mean,
that's a good point. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see like the ordering with the single one versus 10 rows as well. Are you recreating the same ordering effect?
Right at the beginning.
Yeah.
So yes, that would be cool.
Systemic bias.
Or do we need to explicitly tell them you are answering each question sequentially? Then they will do it.
It's like
no, like in like that instruction is explicitly stated in the question.
In the answer instruction, like it'll be like, okay, here, provide a list of provide a list with where each element of the list corresponds to your answer to each of the following 10 questions, gives you a 10 element list.
Yeah. Like for example, one of the ways to test it would be to see, the 2 well-ref survey question, how satisfied and how happy are you, and then you change the order to see whether there are differences.
Yeah.
That's how they test for systemic. But there may be situations, particularly when we're running dynamic models, where we want systemic bias, where we want the history to come forward so that past decisions affect the future, right? We don't want independence in at all. We don't want IID because we don't.
And you can play around with the batch mode and the way that you organize the questions. Like again, batch, it's effectively, if you had 10 questions and you run batch mode, or 1 row and 10 questions, I don't know, is that the same? I don't know, that's a question on itself.
Exactly. We need to get some.
But we do need to, we need to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's a question here.
What exactly is the case?
Trying to think about my question. If my neighbor's one is separated in each, it could be in one.
Yeah, you could put it in one and give like 3 answers in one or something like that. Yeah.
And I have ones where it's you return a list where each element corresponds. It's all in the one box and it's all together. Yeah. So just the discussion here that there's a study in of itself, like sort of pulling apart that batching versus unbatching, but it's a good way to save on and also keep. So the way I think about it is like a question block, right? Like if I'm answering a block of questions, I usually get, hey, which of these people would you not want as your neighbor? And it's a block, right? So I blocked it, to block it together. If you pull them apart, you're doing one by one, I don't know. There'll be a difference, even if you ask a human versus, I would. Yeah, because like the question is the same and the answer instruction is the exact same. It just like, whether you want a drug addict. No, it's good.
So again, get quite complex. Now we're moving into group studies, give the vote on this thing. Everyone has, you have 5 group members or whatever in the agent context. Maybe that's 5 different profiles in each of the columns per row. Okay, that would mean 5 different people. You're treating the agent row as multiple agents. And multiple. If we have column 1 is agent 1, column 2, agent 2, column 3, agent 3, and that's 1 row is the group. Then we can start to sort of look at some of this group sort of study stuff, right? So you're a jury, you're on a jury, it's a high profile case. How do you vote? Give me the vote of each individual person in your group. Cool. What about the transcript of the discussion? For forwards and backwards arguments sort of thing. observational logs of behaviors, streams of consciousness, basically. Please go have a look at these and look through these examples, because we're sort of moving down, give lots of different examples of different directions you could take. But I'm sure your ones are going to be a lot better than mine, because I was just doing this quickly. So lots of different possibilities, I guess, and lots of examples in this this set of slides. So when we pick it up in a couple of weeks' time, we can maybe choose out, if someone wants to bring, you want to have a look through these and pick out some examples, and we really go in depth into one or two of them or something like that. That would be cool. So I'll talk to Jen. Maybe we do a bit of a, I don't know. We'll think about how best to do that with polling or something.
Those who are interested in working on, they can bring it on early on to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be cool. So if anyone wants to sort of bring in something in the next 2 weeks, and we can try and sort of, do the session around 1 or 2 or 3 or something like that, it'd be cool to get a bit more interactive, because I know you've been absorbing most of this, hopefully. But it's sort of maybe monologuing at this point. So we'll pick it up 2 weeks' time. Keep an eye out for Jen's email, and with the whole, the trial licenses and that sort of stuff as well, if you just let her know. And then 2 weeks' time, we'll see you guys back. Thank you very much for taking time. Sorry for running over time.